Well, good evening, friends. It's been a couple of nights, but let's get back to it. Leviticus is where we left off, and chapter 13 is where we'll start. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when anyone has a swelling or a rash or a shiny spot on their skin that may be a defiling skin disease, they must be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons who is a priest. The priest is to examine the sore in the skin, and if the hair in the sore has turned white and the sore appears to be more than skin deep, it is defiled skin disease. When the priest examines that person, he shall pronounce them ceremonially unclean. If the shiny spot on the skin is white but does not appear to be more than skin deep, and the hair in that has not turned white, the priest is to isolate the affected person for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine them, and if he sees that the sore is unchanged and has not spread in the skin, he is to isolate them for another 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine them again, and if the sore is faded and is not spread in the skin, the priest shall announce them clean. It is only a rash. They must wash their clothes, and they will be clean. But if the rash does spread to their skin after they show themselves to the priest to be pronounced clean, they must appear before the priest again. The priest to examine that person. If the rash is spread to the skin, he shall pronounce them unclean. It is a defiling skin disease. When anyone has a defiling skin disease, they must be brought to the priest. The priest is to examine them, and if there's a white swelling in the skin and turn the hair white, and if there is raw flesh in the swelling, it is a chronic skin disease, and the priest shall pronounce them unclean. He is not to isolate them because they are already unclean. The disease breaks out all over their skin. So far as the priest can see, it covers all the skin of the affected person from head to foot. The priest is to examine them. If the disease is to cover their whole body, he shall pronounce them clean. Since it's all turned white, they are clean. But whenever raw flesh appears on them, they will be unclean. When the priest sees the raw flesh, he shall pronounce them unclean. The raw flesh is unclean. They have a defiling disease. If the raw flesh changes and turns white, they must go to the priest. The priest is to examine them, and if the sores have turned white, the priest shall pronounce the affected person clean, then they will be clean. Someone has a boil on the skin and it heals, and in the place where the boil was, a white swelling or reddish white spot appears. They must present themselves to the priest. The priest is to examine it, and if it appears to be more than skin deep and the hair in it has turned white, the priest shall pronounce that the person unclean. It is a defiling skin disease that has broken out where the boil was. But if the priest examines it and there is no white hair in it, and it is not more than skin deep and it is faded, then the priest is to isolate them for 7 days. If it is spreading in the skin, the priest shall announce them unclean. It is a defiling disease. But if the spot is unchanged and has not spread, it is only a scar from the boil, the priest shall announce them clean. When someone has a burn on their skin and a reddish white or white spot appears in the raw flesh of the burn, the priest is to examine the spot, and if the hair in it has turned white and it appears to be more than skin deep, it is a defiling disease that has broken out into the burn. The priest shall announce them unclean. It is a defiling skin disease. But if the priest examines it and there is no white hair in it in the spot, and if there is not more than skin deep and it is faded, then the priest is to isolate them for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine that person, and if it is spreading in the skin, the priest shall pronounce them unclean. It is a defiling skin disease. If, however, the spot is unchanged and it is not spread in the skin but is faded, it is a swelling from the burn, and the priest shall not pronounce them clean. It is only a scar from the burn. If a man or woman has a sore on their head or chin, the priest is to examine the sore, and if it appears to be more than skin deep, and the hair in it is yellow and thin, the priest shall pronounce them unclean. It is a defiling skin disease on the head or chin. But if, when the priest examines the sore, it does not seem to be more than skin deep, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest is to isolate the affected person for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine the sore, and if it's not spread and there is no yellow hair in it, and it does not appear to be more than skin deep, then the man or woman must shave themselves except for the affected area, and the priest is to keep them isolated another 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine the sore, and if it is not spread in the skin and it appears to be no more than skin deep, The priest shall pronounce them clean. They must wash their clothes, and they will be clean. But if the sore does spread in the skin after they are pronounced clean, the priest is to examine them, and if he finds that the sore is spread in the skin, he does not need to look for yellow hair, they are unclean. If, however, the sore is changed so far as the priest can see, and if a black hair is grown in it, the affected person is healed. They are clean, and the priest shall pronounce them clean. When a man or woman has white spots on the skin, the priest is to examine them, and if the spots are dull white, it is a harmless rash that has broken out on the skin. They are clean. A man who has lost his hair and is bald is clean. If he has lost his hair from the front of his scalp and has a bald forehead, he is clean. But if he has reddish white sore on a bald head or forehead, it is a defiling a disease breaking out on his head or forehead. The priest is to examine him, and if swollen sore on his head or forehead is reddish white like a defiling skin disease, the man is diseased and unclean. The priest shall announce him unclean because of the sore on his head. Anyone with such a defiling skin disease must wear torn clothes. Let their hair be unkempt. Cover the lower part of their face and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." As long as they have the disease, they remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp. As for any fabric that is spoiled with a defiling mold, any woolen or linen clothing, any woven or knitted material of linen or wool, any leather or anything made of leather, if the affected area is in fabric, the leather or woven or knitted material or any leather article is greenish or reddish, it is a defiling mold and must be shown to the priest. The priest is to examine the affected area and isolate the article for 7 days. On the 7th day is to examine it. If the mold is spread in the fabric, the woven or knitted material or leather, whatever its use, it is a persistent defiling mold. The article is unclean. He must burn the fabric, the woven or knitted material of wool or linen, or any leather article that has been spoiled. Because the defiling mold is persistent, the article must be burned. But if, when the priest examines it, the mold is not spread in the fabric, the woven or knitted material or leather article, he shall order that the spoiled article be washed. Then he is to isolate it for another 7 days. After the article has been washed, the priest is to examine it again, and if the mold has not changed its appearance, even though it is not spread, it is unclean. Burn it, no matter which side of the fabric has been spoiled. If, when the priest examines it, the mold has faded after the article has been washed, he is to tear the spoiled part out of the fabric, the leather or woven or knitted material. But if it reappears in the fabric, in the woven or knitted material, or any leather article, it is spreading mold. Whatever has the mold must be burned. Any fabric, woven, or knitted material, or any leather article that has been washed, and it is rid of the mold, must again be washed. Then it will be clean. These are the regulations concerning defiling molds in woolen or linen clothing, woven or knitted material, or any article, for pronouncing them clean or unclean. Chapter 14. The Lord said to Moses, "These are the regulations for any diseased person at the time of their ceremonial cleansing, when they are brought to the priest. The priest is to go outside the camp and examine them. If they have been healed of their defiling skin diseases, the priest shall order that two live clean birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop be brought for that person to be cleansed. Then the priest shall order that one of the birds be killed over the fresh water and clay pot. He is then to take the live bird and dip it, together with the cedar wood and the scarlet yarn and the hyssop, in the blood of the bird that was killed over the fresh water. 7 times he shall sprinkle the one to be cleansed of the defiling disease, then pronounce him clean. After that he is to release the live bird into open fields. The person to be cleansed must wash their clothes, shave off all of their hair, and bathe with water. Then they will be ceremonially clean. After this they may come into the camp, but they must stay outside their tent for 7 days. On the 7th day they must shave off all their hair. They must shave their head, their beard, their eyebrows, and the rest of their hair. They must wash their clothes and bathe themselves with water, and they will be clean. On the 8th day they must bring 2 male lambs and 1 ewe lamb, a year old, each without defect, along with 3/10 of an ephah of finest flour mixed with olive oil for a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. The priest who pronounces them clean shall present both, the one to be cleansed and their offerings, before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then the priest is to take one of the male lambs and offer it as a guilt offering, along with the log of oil. He shall wave them before the Lord as a wave offering. He is to slaughter the lamb in the sanctuary area where the sin offering and the burnt offering are slaughtered. Like the sin offering, the guilt offering belongs to the priest. It is most holy. The priest is to take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of their right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot. The priest shall then take some of the log of oil, pour it on the palm of his own left hand, dip his right forefinger into the oil in his palm, and with his finger sprinkle some of it before the Lord 7 times. The priest is to put some of the oil remaining in his palm on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of their right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot, on top of the blood of the guilt offering. The rest of the oil in the palm the priest shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed, and make atonement for them before the Lord. Then the priest is to sacrifice the sin offering and make atonement for the one to be cleansed from their uncleanliness. After that the priest shall slaughter the burnt offering and offer it on the altar, together with the grain offering, to make atonement for them, and they will be clean. If, however, they are poor and they cannot afford these, they must take 1 male lamb as a guilt offering to be waved to make atonement for them, together with 1/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with olive oil, for a grain offering, a log of oil, and 2 doves and 2 young pigeons, such as they can afford, 1 for the sin offering and 1 for the burnt offering. On the 8th day they must bring them for their cleansing to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting, before the Lord. The priest is to take the lamb of the guilt offering, together with a log of oil, and wave them before the Lord as a wave offering. He shall slaughter the lamb for the guilt offering, and take some of its blood, and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of the right hand, on the big toe of the right foot. The priest is to pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and with his right forefinger sprinkle some of the oil from his palm 7 times before the Lord. Some of the oil in his palm he is to put in the same places he put the blood of the guilt offering, on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot. The rest of the oil in his palm the priest shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed, to make atonement for them before the Lord. Then he shall sacrifice the doves or the young pigeons, such as the person can afford. One is the sin offering, and the other is a burnt offering, together with a grain offering. In this way the priest will make atonement before the Lord on behalf of the one to be cleansed. These are the regulations for anyone who has a defiling skin disease and who cannot afford the regular offerings for their cleansing. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when you enter the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as a possession, and I put a spreading mold in a house in that land, the owner of the house must go and tell the priest, I have seen something that looks like defiling mold in my house. The priest is to order the house to be emptied before he goes in to examine the mold, so that nothing in the house will be pronounced unclean. After this, the priest is to go in and inspect the house. He is to examine the mold on the walls, and if it has greenish or reddish depressions that appear deeper than the surface of the wall, the priest shall go out of the doorway of the house and close it up for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall return to inspect the house. If the mold has spread on the walls, he is to order that all contaminated stones be torn out and thrown into the unclean place outside of town. He must have all the inside walls of the house scraped, and the material that is scraped off dumped into an unclean place outside of town. Then they are to take the other stones to replace these, and take new clay and plaster the house. If the defiling mold reappears in the house, if the stones have been torn out and the house scraped and plastered, the priest is to go in and examine it, and if the mold has spread in the house, it is a persistent defiling mold. The house is unclean. It must be torn down, its stones, timbers, and all plaster, and taken outside of town to an unclean place. Anyone who goes into the house while it is closed up will be unclean till evening. Anyone who sleeps or eats in the house must wash their clothes. But if the priest comes to examine it and the mold is not spread after the house has been plastered, he shall pronounce the house clean because the defiling mold is gone. To purify the house, he is to take 2 birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop. He shall kill one of the birds over fresh water in the clay pot. He is to take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet yarn, and the live bird, dip them into the blood of the dead bird and the fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. He shall purify the house with the bird's blood and the fresh water, the live bird, the cedar wood, and the hyssop, and the scarlet yarn. Then he is to release the live bird in the open fields outside of town. In this way he will make atonement for the house, and it will be clean. These are the regulations for any defiling skin disease, for a sore, for defiling molds in fabric or in a house, and for a swelling, a rash, or shiny spot, to determine when something is clean or unclean. These are the regulations for defiling skin disease and defiling molds. Leviticus chapters 13 and 14. The Word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.